Once there were people with see-through heads made of glass, and all that could ever be said could be seen there within while still just a thought, much as in a bowl one sees a fish that's been caught. Thoughts meant for teasin' were red as a ribbon, and green was the hue designated for fibbin', and yellow was happy, and purple was sad, and blue was romantic, and rumors were plaid. Meek thoughts were spotted, and stalwart had stripes, and triangles signified all kinds of gripes, and patterns with checks were for thoughts that were greedy, and circles meant no, and stars meant yes, indeedy. But they had a problem with making no sound, the need to communicate all year round the thoughts that inside their heads floated and hovered, so even in winter their heads went uncovered. And then, in the winter, there came a great freeze, and it was so cold they all fell to their knees, for the fluid between their two ears was freezin', and thoughts ended up in their Kleenex through sneezin'. So, to keep all the people from getting much dumber, the president called in a cranial plumber who bored a small hole just beneath all their noses and piped in warm air through a series of hoses. And that was the way all the people were saved, and they had a great party, and everyone raved of the way that the plumber had handled their cases. But then they remembered the holes in their faces, and they looked at each other and saw the deformity, and then it struck them the awesome enormity of having a hole twixt their nose and their chin. It was so absurd that they started to grin. And that was the first time they'd e'er seen us smile. They thought it delightful. They liked the new style. Then something else happened, you don't know the half. That whole race of people, they started to laugh. They giggled, they chortled, they hooted and howled, they ha-ha'd and hee-heed. And then they allowed us how these were quite good things, this laughing and grinning. How could they know it would lead to such sinning? The plumber did offer to plug up each orifice, knowing that where one wins one also forfeits a victory or two. Where there's good there is evil. He knew too much good could cause an upheaval. But his offer the people they firmly refused. Such a gift, they rejoindered, could not be abused. And then they grew wide-eyed at what had occurred. To reply to the plumber, they'd said the first word. And then words abounded. The power of speech, they all were astounded. What lay in their reach with such a fine plaything knew no bounds at all. 'Twas like a new toy that holds children in thrall. So the pages of history continued to turn, and they used their new words to teach and to learn. For hundreds of years they perfected their language, and after a while they began to know anguish. For they spoke so much they'd begun to take for granted their clear heads, which then grew opaque and obscured exact meanings of words that were spoken. And a whole flock of evils thereby was awoken. They misunderstood, and took things the wrong way, arousing suspicions one could not allay with the merest kind thought, as they could before, when their heads could be seen into right to the core. They misjudged each other, were quick to accuse, and sight of their alikeness they began to lose, and where they had once been one great race of man, each joined a new country, religion, or clan. This new separation spawned mucho misconduct. They spied on each other, and then they tucked notes inside halters on pigeons which flew to headquarters, informing of bad guys encroaching their borders. They warred on each other with great big bazookas, and each claimed forthrightly, "We're better than you, 'cause you know not of us, but we know of you, and the ridiculous nonsense you believe in and do." So God wiped them out. God was pretty ticked off at the way they behaved, like their brains had gone soft. God was perfectly happy with things as they'd been. back when clear-headed thinking was the thinking of men. So God put an idea in their poor addled pates to hasten them all toward their showdowns with fates. And sure enough, they all conflagrated themselves. And way up in heaven God took from the shells all the stuff to whip up a new batch of mankind. And God used all knowledge to fashion a mind that did not need see-throughness to understand clearly that all men are equal and should behave peerly. Then God brushed all the ash from the burned-up planet and told the new folks those before you who ran it got caught up in words and forgot the importance of getting along, and now they are mort. And so don't let your mouth hole have things its own way. You get caught up in words, you'll discover one day that your thought's been obscured by the words you have said, and you'll wish that you had a see-through head.